Right now, 6 human beings are orbiting Earth at 17,500 miles per hour, cut off from every person they've ever loved. What happens to a mind when the whole world becomes a window view? The International Space Station is roughly the size of a 6-bedroom house, but astronauts can't step outside, they can't take a walk, they can't leave, for 6 months at a time. Isolation isn't just being alone, it's being unable to leave. And when you add microgravity, radiation risk, and a 15-minute communication delay, the psychological weight becomes extraordinary. Every astronaut knows what they're signing up for, but knowing and living it are two completely different things. The distance from home isn't measured in miles, it's measured in moments you can't share. NASA's Human Research Program has spent decades studying what extended confinement does to the human brain, and what they've found should change how we think about the future of exploration. The brain under prolonged isolation begins to change, literally. Stress hormones reshape neural pathways. The amygdala becomes hyperactive, and decision-making starts to erode in ways the astronaut may not even notice. In 1994, cosmonaut Valery Polyakov spent 437 days aboard the Mir station, the longest solo spaceflight in history. He returned walking, but researchers found his cognition and emotional regulation were severely altered. Researchers identified a pattern: early excitement, a middle phase of adaptation, and then the third quarter phenomenon. Around the final stretch of a mission, morale and performance drop sharply. Journal entries from astronauts during long missions reveal a consistent emotional arc: wonder, pride, loneliness, frustration, and finally a strange detachment, like watching your own life from outside your body. NASA classifies 5 core psychological stressors of spaceflight: isolation, confinement, monotony, communication delays, and ever-present danger. No other human profession combines all 5 simultaneously. Now add the fact that you're living with the same 2 to 6 people every single day, with nowhere to go when tensions rise. Even the most compatible personalities begin to fracture under that kind of sustained proximity. Psychologists call this interpersonal confinement stress. It's a distinct phenomenon where the problem isn't the mission, it's the inescapable closeness to other human beings in a space you cannot leave. To study this without leaving Earth, NASA and ESA run analog missions, simulations of space confinement. The Mars Desert Research Station in Utah, the high seas habitat in Hawaii, sealed, isolated, monitored. In the 2015 High Seas Mission 4 simulation, crew members reported mood disorders, sleep disruption, and communication breakdowns after just 8 months. And they were still on Earth. They could have walked out. Exercise is one of the first psychological defenses deployed in space, not just for the body, but for the mind. Movement triggers dopamine. Dopamine fights the creeping fog of monotony and despair. And yet, astronauts describe moments of transcendent beauty that no amount of psychological stress can erase. The view of Earth from above, the silence, the overwhelming sense that what they're doing matters. Let's go deeper. What actually happens inside the brain during prolonged isolation? The prefrontal cortex, responsible for rational decisions, begins to lose dominance. The emotional brain starts running the show. Research on Antarctic winter overcruise, humanity's closest Earth analog to long space missions, shows measurable reductions in gray matter volume in the prefrontal cortex after months of isolation. The South Pole winter over, 13 scientists, months of total darkness. No rescue possible. It is the closest thing to a Mars mission we can run on Earth, and the psychological data it generates is invaluable. Those researchers showed significant cognitive decline, slower reaction times, poorer memory recall, reduced spatial reasoning. The brain, deprived of novelty and social diversity, begins to conserve energy by performing less. Time perception warps, days blur together. Without the rhythm of sunrises, commutes, and social cues, the brain loses its temporal anchoring. Astronauts report that weeks can pass feeling like single, indistinguishable days. The communication delay to Mars will reach 24 minutes each way. Imagine calling home and waiting 48 minutes for a reply. No real-time conversation, no emotional immediacy, just recorded messages flying across the void. This communication lag creates what psychologists call temporal social isolation. You're not just physically cut off, you're emotionally delayed from every support system you have. Every concern arrives too late to comfort. Music has emerged as one of the most powerful psychological countermeasures in space. Astronauts report that familiar songs create an immediate emotional anchor, a neurological shortcut back to Earth, to safety, to self. Maslow's hierarchy breaks in space. The basics, air, food, water, are maintained by engineering. But belonging, love, and esteem? Those can't be pressurized into a module, and their absence creates a unique psychological crisis. Interpersonal conflict is the #1 behavioral health concern NASA tracks on long missions. In a confined environment, small irritations become significant grievances. Someone chewing too loudly can destabilize a crew. In 1973, the Skylab 4 crew staged what became known as the astronaut mutiny. They shut off communications with mission control for a full day. Overwhelmed and under-rested, they demanded time to simply rest and think. The incident changed everything. NASA realized that operational efficiency and psychological well-being couldn't be separated. You cannot push human beings past their limits and expect peak performance. The mind will revolt. Today, NASA employs behavioral health and performance specialists who monitor crews during missions, analyzing communication patterns, tone of voice, even word frequency and messages to detect early signs of psychological distress. AI-powered sentiment analysis now flags changes in astronaut communication weeks before the crew themselves recognize a problem. The algorithm hears what the mission commander won't say out loud. Virtual reality is being tested as a psychological escape valve. A 20-minute session in a simulated forest or beach significantly reduces cortisol levels. Your brain doesn't fully distinguish the simulated calm from the real thing. Growing food in space isn't just about nutrition, it's profound psychological therapy. Astronauts report that tending plants creates a sense of purpose, of life, of connection to nature that no amount of engineering can replicate. The third-quarter phenomenon is consistent across nearly every long-duration mission. 3 quarters through, when the destination feels distant and home feels equally far, is when the psychological risk reaches its peak. Sleep disruption compounds everything. In space, the ISS experiences 16 sunrises per day. The circadian rhythm has no natural anchor. Astronauts averaging under 6 hours of sleep show measurably impaired judgment within 2 weeks. NASA prescribes melatonin, blue light therapy, and strict sleep scheduling as cognitive protection measures. Because a sleep-deprived astronaut making a navigation error 100 million miles from Earth is an extinction-level mistake. And yet, ask any astronaut their most cherished memory and most will say, the spacewalk. Floating in the void, completely alone, tethered by a single line. Fear and wonder collide into something that permanently changes who you are. Everything we just discussed, multiply it by 3. A Mars mission would last approximately 2.5 years, with zero possibility of early return. Once you leave Earth's orbit, you are committed. There is no coming home early. Orbital mechanics create a psychological phenomenon unique to deep space, the point of no return. Past a certain trajectory, returning to Earth would require more fuel than the mission carries. You are committed whether you want to be or not. The Mars transit vehicle will house 4 to 6 crew members in roughly the space of a studio apartment for 9 months. No windows to Earth, no blue sky, no wind, no birdsong. Just the hum of life support systems. Crew selection for Mars may be the single most important psychological decision in the mission. NASA is developing AI models to predict interpersonal compatibility across 900 days of forced proximity. Chemistry isn't optional. Candidates undergo years of psychological evaluation before selection. They're placed in high-stress simulations, conflict scenarios, and isolation tests. Emotional regulation and team cohesion matter more than IQ. The overview effect, a profound cognitive shift experienced by astronauts when they first see Earth from space, can be both psychologically protective and destabilizing. Some astronauts report it as the most spiritually disorienting moment of their lives. Apollo 14 astronaut Edgar Mitchell experienced such a profound psychological transformation on the way back from the Moon that he later founded an institute to study consciousness. Space doesn't just challenge the mind, it reconstructs it. When the crew finally lands on Mars, new psychological stressors emerge. The Martian landscape is deeply alien. No blue sky, no green, no water sounds. The brain, wired for earthly beauty, finds no comfort in the red silence. Earth will be visible as a bright star from the Martian surface. Psychologists anticipate this could trigger what they call pale blue dot syndrome, a specific grief response to seeing your entire world reduced to a speck of light. Mars crews will have a designated crew medical officer with mental health training, but no psychiatrist. Peer support and self-directed therapy protocols will be the front line, and those protocols are being written right now. NASA's SHAPA mission, Crew Health and Performance Exploration Analog, ran the first simulated year-long Mars mission in 2023. 4 volunteers lived in a 1,700-square-foot 3D printed habitat in Houston. The data is still being analyzed. Participants reported resource conflicts, role confusion, and fluctuating motivation, despite being volunteers who chose the simulation. Imagine the same dynamics when there is no door to walk out of and the mission lasts 900 days. Simon, the crew interactive mobile companion, was tested on the ISS as an AI psychological support tool. Astronaut Alexander Gerst famously told it, "Don't be mean. Even with robots, boundaries matter in close quarters." Cultural psychology adds another layer. International crews bring different communication styles, concepts of authority, and personal space norms. What's direct and efficient to one culture can feel aggressive or dismissive to another. Research shows that culturally diverse crews perform better on complex problem-solving, but show greater interpersonal friction during stress. The key variable isn't diversity itself. It's whether the crew has tools to navigate difference. Mindfulness meditation was introduced into NASA astronaut training after research showed it reduced cortisol by 20% in confined environments. Scott Kelly meditated daily during his year in space and credited it with his psychological stability. Scott Kelly spent 340 consecutive days on the ISS while his twin brother Mark remained on Earth. The resulting twin study showed measurable changes in gene expression, cognitive speed, and emotional processing. Isolation leaves a biological mark. The twin study revealed that 91 genes changed their expression levels during spaceflight, many linked to immune function, DNA repair, and cognitive performance. Space doesn't just challenge your mind, it rewrites your biology. Next-generation wearables will continuously monitor astronauts' biometric stress signatures, catching psychological deterioration before it becomes behavioral. The goal? Intervene before the crisis, not after. But with a 24-minute communication delay, even a perfect early warning system can't deliver timely Earth-based intervention. Mars crews will need psychological autonomy, the ability to manage mental health crises independently, without Earth's help. Return is not rescue. The moment astronauts land back on Earth, a new psychological challenge begins, one that mission planners historically underestimated and returning astronauts rarely feel prepared for. After months in silence, the noise of Earth is physically jarring. Colors seem too saturated, crowds too loud. The smell of rain, of soil, of food, it all arrives at once. The brain, recalibrated for the void, struggles to process normal reality. What looks like depression is often readaptation, but the line between recalibration and clinical disorder is thin, and astronauts, trained to project strength, are among the worst at admitting when they've crossed it. Returning astronauts report decision fatigue in civilian life. After months where every choice was structured, regulated, and mission-critical, the freedom of choice becomes its own form of psychological stress. Too many options feels like chaos. Relationships are altered in both directions. Families adapt to life without the astronaut. Children grow. Spouses build new routines. The returning hero arrives to a family that has moved on without them and must now figure out how to fit back in. Psychologists call this astronaut spouse syndrome, not a clinical diagnosis, but a recognized pattern where partners develop parallel identities during long missions, and reunification requires essentially rebuilding a relationship from scratch. The physical recovery mirrors the psychological one. Bones weakened by microgravity, muscles atrophied, vestibular systems recalibrated for weightlessness. Astronauts spend months relearning to be human bodies on a planet with gravity. Buzz Aldrin battled depression and alcoholism after Apollo 11. Having walked on the moon at 39, what follows? The psychological literature on peak experience syndrome shows that transcendent achievement can paradoxically trigger preference emptiness. Post-mission psychological support is now mandatory at NASA and ESA. Astronauts undergo structured debrief therapy, family integration sessions, and longitudinal monitoring for years after return. The mission. Long-term follow-up studies show that most astronauts fully reintegrate and report that the mission enhanced their psychological resilience, empathy, and sense of purpose. But roughly 20% show persistent symptoms requiring ongoing clinical support. Many astronauts describe their missions as having permanently recalibrated their sense of what matters. Pettiness fades, gratitude intensifies. The experience of cosmic insignificance paradoxically makes human life feel more, not less, meaningful. The overview effect researcher Frank White documented that virtually every astronaut who sees Earth from space undergoes a lasting psychological transformation, a shift from ego identification with nation and tribe to identification with humanity as a species. Artemis, Gateway, Mars, the next generation of space habitats will be designed with psychology at the center, not as an afterthought. Every window, every color, every cubic foot of personal space is a psychological decision. NASA's Human Research Program is collaborating with architects, interior designers, and environmental psychologists to build habitats that actively support mood. Biophilic design, personalized lighting cycles, and acoustic management are now mission-critical. Social AI companions designed specifically for astronauts are in development. Not replacements for human connection, but bridges. Entities that can listen, remember, reflect, and adapt, providing the feeling of being understood when no humans are available. Space psychology doesn't stay in space. The findings from astronaut confinement research have transformed how we treat prisoners in solitary confinement, design submarines, manage remote oil rig crews, and understand pandemic isolation. When COVID-19 locked billions inside their homes, the most experienced confinement psychologists on Earth were NASA researchers. Their protocols for managing isolation, routine, and mental health became the template for pandemic mental health guidance. The psychological tools built for space, VR therapy, AI monitoring, structured routines, team cohesion protocols, resilience training, are now available to every human being who faces isolation, loneliness, or confinement on Earth. The next astronauts to face these psychological challenges are children right now, looking up at the same stars humans have always feared and loved. And we are learning how to protect their minds across distances no human has yet survived. Right now, approximately 400 humans around the world are living in some form of enforced isolation, in research stations, on vessels, in space. Their psychological experiences are being studied so that all of us can live more resilient lives. The psychology of space exploration is ultimately the psychology of hope, of choosing to go anyway, knowing the risks, accepting the loneliness, enduring the fear, because what lies beyond matters more than what lies ahead. In every generation, human beings have walked into the unknown, not because it was safe, but because the alternative, standing still, is its own form of psychological death. Exploration is not instinct, it is identity. Carl Sagan said Earth is a mote of dust suspended in a sunbeam. Space psychology teaches us what that actually means, not as a philosophical abstraction, but as a lived, felt, embodied experience that reshapes every priority you've ever had. The greatest challenge of going to space was never the rocket, the radiation, or the distance. It was always this: sending a human mind, a creature of touch, community, love, and sky, into a universe built from silence, and asking it to come home.